May 9th, I rose in this chamber to ask the Minister of Finance when the Liberal government would stop sitting on the $2.5 billion in promised carbon tax rebates while business insolvencies skyrocket and small businesses suffer under higher taxes and inflation. Indeed, this promise was originally made in 2019. In the budget, I will admit, the government did announce that carbon tax rebates would be forthcoming. However, it did take 5 years, and this is a tax that 80% of small businesses want eliminated. This spring, however, they announced that they will reduce the amount of financial relief businesses will receive from carbon tax revenue in 2024 from 9% to 5%. Small businesses, as a result of this government's economic failure and incompetence, are drowning in debt and are struggling to stay afloat. Skyrocketing commercial rent, payroll and carbon tax increases, and Liberal red tape have created an impossible economic situation for many businesses across Canada. The latest report from the Superintendent of Bankruptcy revealed a 58.6% increase year-over-year in business insolvencies across Canada for the period ending April 30th, 2024. Statistics Canada reported that in February, more businesses closed their doors than opened. The largest declines were seen in transportation and warehousing, construction, think home building, accommodation and food services. The Labour Force Survey each month continues to highlight the massive gap in public sector job growth and private sector job growth. The growth in size of the public service is greatly outpacing private sector job growth. Not only quality of life is also continuing to decline in our country, and our economy is underperforming the American economy by the widest margin since 1965. Amongst our G7 peers, only Italy has seen a greater decline in labor productivity compared to the United States. In 1984, Canada produced 88% of the value generated by the U.S. economy per hour. By 2022, that figure has fallen to 71%. Again, only Italy performed worse over the same period. If this government truly has the back of small businesses, as I've heard in this House and during QP, the situation would in fact look very different. Rather than taxing Canadians into oblivion and offering a woefully insufficient rebate and far less than was originally promised, this government could start controlling its spending and stop driving up inflation and create a competitive economy for our small businesses to thrive. Indeed, the statistics I outlined don't lie. So if this government, and I quote, truly urgently wants to return the proceeds from the carbon tax, then I will ask, why did it take 5 years for this government to make an announcement? And on what day will small businesses start receiving this rebate? Secondly, why did they reduce the amount given to small businesses from 9 to 5%?
And it's always nice to be in the House in the evening with my colleague from Mission Mascouy Fraser Canyon. I thank him for the question, and I thank him for the opportunity for adjournment debate on this important issue. Mr. Speaker, small and medium-sized businesses are the backbone of the Canadian economy, and over the last 4 or 5 years, they've had a really, really challenging environment to operate in. Depending on what sector and where they're located, the pandemic has had an outsized impact on a lot of small businesses. But throughout that tumultuous period, our government was there for them. We paid for much of their salaries. We paid for a lot of that rent. We kicked in wherever we could. We provided CEBA loans, and we kept the Canadian economy afloat. We took on some debt so that they wouldn't have to, Mr. Speaker, and the result is that over the last 2 years, that recession that so many economists and pundits and op-ed writers indicated was on the horizon in Canada has been avoided. And I think it's really worth pointing out that despite all the gloomy talk of the Conservative Party of Canada, Canada's economy is doing very, very well compared to our colleagues in the G7 or our partner countries. And, you know, it's always easy to find a statistic to point out that, you know, it's bad here or it's bad there. But overall, Canada's wage growth has caught up to inflation, which is excellent news for workers. We've seen 1 million, more than 1 million, I think the last figure was 1.3 million new jobs compared to before the pandemic. And, you know, the inflation that the member was talking about, he's accusing this government of contributing to that inflation while not really giving our government or the institution across the road, the Bank of Canada, too much credit for that inflation coming down in the last 20 months consecutively to a more reasonable rate of, I think the most recent rate was somewhere between 2.3 and 2.7%, which is getting really, really close to their target rate of 2%, Mr. Speaker. So look, we're getting there as a country. I'm not taking credit as a member of this side. I want to give credit to Canadian workers, to Canadian innovators, to Canadian small business owners, and people who worked so hard during the pandemic, took advantage of some of those government programs, which they were entitled to, but they've continued to fight through headwinds. And the reason that we're not in a recession now in June of 2024 is because of their hard work and ingenuity. As the member very rightly pointed out, Budget 2024 proposes to invest $2.5 billion to support 600,000 businesses across Canada, Mr. Speaker. For context, the CEBA loans supported Canadian businesses with upwards of $45 or $50 billion. Mr. Speaker, our government's been there for small and medium-sized businesses, and as we fight climate change together, as we innovate to lower our emissions together, as we continue to serve Canadians, employ Canadians, and make sure that Canadians have all of the opportunity that they deserve in the future, we'll be there, we'll have their backs, and we know that they'll continue to do their great work in driving our economy forward, the green future.
I will point out in respect to the carbon tax rebate that money was collected from small businesses and redistributed back to small businesses. It is in fact not an investment. It is a wealth distribution scheme put forward by the government. And it's not the Conservative Party of Canada, the loyal opposition. It is in fact the Bank of Canada who outlined that we have a productivity crisis in Canada. It's the Bank of Canada outlining that the GDP per worker in this country is precipitously falling. That means workers are getting less on average than they did in the past. In other words, people are working harder and taking home less every month. That's what Conservatives want to fix, and that's why we continually say more powerful paychecks. We want Canadians to be able to keep more of their hard work, and we also want to see policies from government that give Canadian businesses a foundation of success moving forward.
Look, it sounds like we have the same goal. We both want to help Canadian businesses. However, we put forth ideas, actual policies, not just three-word slogans and rhyming couplets that look good on bumper stickers and hoodies, Mr. Speaker. It requires some intellect to come to this place with policies and recommendations that will actually support the economy, support Canadians, at the same time lower our emissions and drive innovation forward, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, what we've seen from the Conservative Party is just constant sloganeering. You know, powerful paychecks, that sounds really good, but what does that mean? Put forth a policy that would suggest that paychecks would actually grow as a result. Now, carbon pricing, Mr. Speaker, has been in place in that member's province for well over a decade. In fact, some of his colleagues on the Conservative side contributed to that policy, and it's been a great success. Emissions per capita have come down in British Columbia, and they continue to, and we'll continue to support evidence-based policy just like that. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.